On April 26, 2025, hope emerged from the heart of the Vatican. Amidst the solemnity of Pope Francis's funeral, U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met face to face. Their meeting, brief but significant, drew the eyes of the world. Against a backdrop of conflict, this encounter was seen as a glimmer of hope. For a moment, the world dared to hope for a breakthrough. The meeting, shrouded in secrecy, lasted for a mere 15 minutes. However, the brevity of the encounter did little to diminish its potential impact. This was a moment where the weight of the world, quite literally, rested on their shoulders. The future of Ukraine and indeed the stability of global peace seemed to hang in the balance. The private nature of the discussion, with no aides present, only amplified the sense of gravity. It was a conversation between two men, each bearing the heavy mantle of leadership, facing each other with the fate of nations in their hands. Every word spoken, every gesture exchanged, carried the potential to alter the course of history. Despite the heavy atmosphere, both leaders emerged from the meeting with cautiously optimistic assessments. The White House described the discussion as very productive, hinting at progress made behind closed doors. Zelensky, echoing the sentiment, characterized the meeting as good. His words carefully chosen, yet hinting at a glimmer of hope. The fact that they were able to have a conversation at all, to engage in direct dialogue amidst the tensions and accusations, was a significant step forward. The world watched, waiting with bated breath, hoping that this meeting would be a turning point, a moment where dialogue triumphed over discord. As the leader of a nation grappling with invasion and immense suffering, Zelensky carried the hopes and fears of his people with him to the Vatican. His message was clear. Ukraine desperately needed peace, and achieving that peace required a firm and unwavering commitment from the international community. Zelensky's plea centered around three key demands: an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, unwavering protection for Ukrainian civilians caught in the crossfire, and a path towards a lasting and just peace. His words, though measured, carried the weight of desperation, a plea for an end to the bloodshed that had engulfed his nation. He emphasized that Ukraine was ready and willing to engage in meaningful dialogue to seek a diplomatic solution to the crisis. However, he remained resolute in his stance that any peace agreement must be predicated on the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. The world listened intently as Zelensky laid out his vision for peace, a vision rooted in justice, dignity, and the fundamental right of the Ukrainian people to self-determination. His words resonated with a global audience, a stark reminder of the human cost of this ongoing conflict. Trump's response to the meeting, delivered via his preferred medium of Truth Social, took many by surprise. Gone was the fiery rhetoric that had often characterized his stance on the conflict. Instead, his words struck a more measured, even conciliatory tone, signaling a potential shift in his approach. He condemned the recent wave of Russian missile strikes on Ukrainian civilian targets, labeling them as barbaric and unjustifiable. This condemnation, a departure from his previous tendency to downplay or even excuse Russian aggression, was seen by many as a significant development. Furthermore, Trump hinted at the possibility of imposing further sanctions on Russia, including measures targeting the country's financial institutions. This suggestion, a clear departure from his previous reluctance to take concrete action against Russia, fueled speculation that he was finally ready to adopt a tougher stance. Whether this shift in tone represented a genuine change of heart or a calculated political maneuver remained a subject of intense debate. Regardless of the motivation, the possibility of Trump using his influence to pressure Russia was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. The Trump-Zelensky meeting unfolded against a backdrop of unwavering European support for Ukraine. Across the continent, leaders expressed solidarity with Zelensky and condemned Russian aggression in the strongest possible terms. The message was clear: Europe stood united in its commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. French President Emmanuel Macron, a key figure in the diplomatic efforts to end the conflict, echoed Zelensky's calls for a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement. He stressed the need for Russia to demonstrate a genuine commitment to peace, urging Putin to cease hostilities and engage in good faith negotiations. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen all met with Zelensky, reaffirming their unwavering support for Ukraine. These meetings, taking place on the sidelines of the Pope's funeral, highlighted the international community's resolute backing for Ukraine in its hour of need. The unified front presented by European leaders sent a powerful message to Moscow. The world was watching, and there would be consequences for Russia's aggression. This unwavering support, both moral and material, provided a vital lifeline for Ukraine as it continued to resist the invasion. Despite the glimmers of hope and the unified calls for peace, significant obstacles remained. The status of Crimea, a peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014, continued to be a major sticking point in any potential peace negotiations. Zelensky remained steadfast in his insistence that Crimea was an integral part of Ukraine, illegally occupied and subject to eventual reunification. He reiterated his government's position that any peace deal must include the return of Crimea to Ukrainian control, a non-negotiable demand. Trump, however, publicly criticized Zelensky's stance on Crimea, calling his comments inflammatory and suggesting they were hindering the peace process. He appeared to endorse the idea of Ukraine ceding Crimea to Russia as part of a negotiated settlement, a suggestion that drew immediate condemnation from Kiev. This disagreement over Crimea, a long-standing source of tension between the two leaders, highlighted the complexities of finding a lasting solution to the conflict. It underscored the deep divisions that remained, even as both sides acknowledged the need for a negotiated settlement. The Trump-Zelensky meeting took place in the shadow of immense tragedy. Pope Francis, a global icon of peace and compassion, had passed away just days earlier. His death, a profound loss felt across the world, cast a somber pall over the proceedings. The Pope, throughout his papacy, had been a vocal advocate for peace in Ukraine. He had repeatedly called for an end to the violence, urging both sides to seek a peaceful resolution through dialogue and reconciliation. His absence was deeply felt, a reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of conflict. Moreover, just 2 days before the meeting, a devastating Russian missile attack on Kiev had claimed the lives of at least 12 innocent civilians and left scores injured. This horrific act of violence, a stark reminder of the human cost of the war, served as a chilling backdrop to the diplomatic efforts underway. The timing of the attack, so close to the meeting and the Pope's funeral, raised questions about Russia's commitment to peace and its willingness to engage in good faith negotiations. It served as a stark reminder of the challenges ahead and the fragility of any hopes for a swift resolution. Despite the challenges and the ever-present threat of violence, the Trump-Zelensky meeting at the Vatican offered a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. The very fact that the two leaders were able to meet face-to-face, to engage in direct dialogue amidst the tensions and accusations, was a significant step forward. The shift in Trump's rhetoric, his condemnation of Russian attacks on civilians, and his suggestion of further sanctions, hinted at a potential change in the U.S. approach to the conflict. While his stance on Crimea remained a point of contention, his willingness to engage with Zelensky directly and to acknowledge the suffering of the Ukrainian people offered a sliver of optimism. Furthermore, the unwavering support from European leaders, their condemnation of Russian aggression, and their commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty sent a clear message that the world stood with Ukraine in its hour of need. This international solidarity, both moral and material, provided a vital lifeline for Ukraine as it continued to resist the invasion. The meeting at the Vatican, though brief and inconclusive, represented a flicker of hope in the darkness. It was a reminder that even in the midst of conflict, dialogue remained possible, and that the pursuit of peace, however difficult or improbable, was a cause worth fighting for. As the dust settled on the Vatican meeting, the world watched and waited, holding its breath for any sign of progress. The stakes were incredibly high, not just for Ukraine but for the entire international order. The outcome of this conflict and the manner in which it was resolved would have far-reaching implications for global peace and security. The meeting between Trump and Zelensky, though just a single chapter in a long and complex story, had the potential to be a turning point. It represented a moment where diplomacy, however fragile, had a chance to prevail over violence and aggression. The world held its breath, hoping against hope that this encounter, born out of tragedy and steeped in symbolism, would mark the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where dialogue, reason and compassion would ultimately triumph. The future of Ukraine, and indeed the future of peace in our time, hung in the balance.